Hello, my name is Chrissy Champagne. You are listening to Residue, a true crime podcast dedicated to keeping you paranoid. Last week's episode of Residue, we left you hanging with the mysterious disappearance of Heidi Allen Part 1. So if you haven't checked that one out, I would go back, listen to that. It's a short one, so you can get through it pretty quickly. And then today we are going to pick up where we left off with Part 2 of the mysterious disappearance of Heidi Allen. When I last left you in Part 1, I mentioned at the end that Heidi Allen was a known drug informant for the local police department. Now, this is something that is sort of debated a little bit. So her family would never really talk about it and didn't want to talk about it, but there are two different versions as to why an 18-year-old girl would be a drug informant for the local police in such a small town. Now, at age 15, Heidi was babysitting her cousin's 1-year-old daughter, and that's when Heidi went to a party with some friends, but she brought the 1-year-old with her and left her in the car alone unattended. Now, to be clear, Heidi's cousin, the mother of this baby, says that this is not true. The story is unfounded. Someone in the town called the local police because this party was a rager, and when the police arrived, they found this young child alone in the car, and they wanted to charge Heidi with the crime of endangering the welfare of a child. So, if this was to happen, the charges should have been filed in family court because of Heidi's age 15. But her uncle Russell was a town judge. So the story says that Uncle Russell tried to figure out a way to work out a deal with the deputies so that Heidi would not be charged. So since the town had this really rampant drug problem, it's said that her uncle, the judge, set it up so that Heidi would work as an undercover drug informant to kind of help lead the police in the direction of where all of these drug addicts and drug dealers were hanging out. So this story comes from Heidi's Aunt Martha, who was married to her uncle Russell. She said that Heidi felt like she was under immense pressure with this new task, and that Heidi said it felt like being in jail. Her cousin says that Heidi told her that Heidi just wanted to help a friend of hers that was hanging out with a bad crew, the wrong crew, getting into drugs. She said this to her cousin Missy, and then she told her uncle about this friend and the drugs, and now there's cops involved. So those are the two different stories. It's a little difficult to follow some of the facts in this story. But so here's the deal. Either Heidi was a drug informant or she wasn't. Or she was a drug informant because she could have been arrested for endangering the welfare of a child, or because she told her uncle, who was a judge, that one of her friends needed help. And to be clear, the undersheriff years later would tell reporters that the police would never, ever, ever let a young girl like this be involved in something like this. That would mean that Heidi was a snitch. And in this town, there was a lot of cocaine and a lot of dope involved. And they would never involve a child in this situation. Now, that's what the undersheriff says years later. But in 1994, it was said that Oswego County Sheriff Deputy Chris Van Patten oversaw Heidi as a child informant. He actually interviewed Heidi in her home, and while he did that, he made her an informant card that day, and he had her choose her code name, which was Julia Roberts. He made Heidi tell him some names of local drug dealers, and it was said that this deputy would boast to his friends and patrons of a local dive bar called Champs that he had an underage girl who he had working as an informant. This sheriff deputy would tell a local DJ while they were drinking together at this local bar that he had a young girl ready to help him with a huge drug bust. That's like a very careless thing to be doing as a deputy in a crowded, drunken bar. Another careless thing that you can do is to drop your young informant's informant card at a gas station one day. And that just so happened to be the same exact gas station that Heidi would end up working at years later, the D&W Convenience Store. On this informant card, it had Heidi's name, address, phone number, her code name, and it had a pic, but the pic was a Polaroid that was separate from the car. It was a strange coincidence that the actual store owner of the D&W would find this card and call the police. And then years later, that same girl, Heidi Allen, would start working at the D&W. I just want to point out that when you watch footage of the trial and one of the lawyers is speaking about some of the info that she was not provided with as an attorney in this case, she is shown the informant card and the Polaroid that was found from Heidi's drug informant days. This is the most ridiculous looking, and I don't know if it's because it was 1994, but it's just an index card with a, handwritten pen ink of Heidi's name, Heidi's code name, her address. And then it's just like a cute little Polaroid of her with a cute shirt on with a peace sign on it. It doesn't seem very professional, and it doesn't seem like something that the police would do. I don't know though. I'm not a police officer. I'm just stating my opinion here. It looks shoddy. It looks like, was the entire police department behind this, or was it just that one guy? In my main source, the book Scrapped, Justice and a Teen Informant by Lisa Peebles and John O'Brien, one of Heidi's friends tells the authors that she had put herself in a dangerous situation and then she just disappears. You don't just kidnap a 6-foot-tall, strong, athletic woman unless you have a purpose. Heidi had also told her boyfriend Brett that she was afraid of a cokehead, a local cokehead in her words, who lived close to the D&W. She said that this person was in and out of jail, and this person was part of a group that the deputies were looking into. Heidi said that she felt like she was getting in too deep, and she told a coworker that she was going to parties and reporting back to the sheriff's office. She was worried that these people at the parties would actually start making her use cocaine. Oswego County patrol cars would show up to the D&W, and Heidi would go out and speak to someone. This is what one of Heidi's coworkers said. She said that she often saw a car pull up, and then Heidi would leave the store for a bit, go out, lean into the driver's side, and talk to whoever was in the car for a little bit, and then run back into the store. Now, let's go back to that Easter morning of 1994. Heidi is missing. It is about 9 a.m. and now it is obvious that Heidi was most likely abducted. A command center is set up. They even had a banner hung up in the middle of the village that read, "Where's Heidi?" Sheriff Charles Nellis would say, "It's like a needle in a haystack, but we don't know where the haystack is." They even wanted to call the search off at a certain point, and Heidi's family was like, "Oh, hell no. This search is gonna go on," and they post a $20,000 reward, and they even hire a Texas private eye named Rick Benningfield. Now, Rick Benningfield had conducted many missing persons cases, and he was a cowboy. He was definitely a cowboy, and the people in town were like, "This guy, what expertise does he have to help?" 2 or 3 days after Heidi's abduction, Governor Cuomo calls in the National Guard, and soldiers marched 20 miles a day on the Oswego County roads just searching for Heidi. So Let's review the details that the police have so far. Lead investigator Lieutenant Dean Goodsell said that 10 days after Heidi's disappearance, the police had 4 or 5 suspects that had all taken a lie detector test. They didn't give the public any names, but Richard and Gary Thibodeau were definitely on that list, along with a teacher's assistant, the owner of the D&W Convenience Store, and then a longtime, quote, town troublemaker. "54 days after Heidi Allen has disappeared, it is now 7 a.m. on May 25th, 1994, and Gary Thibodeau and Sharon Raposa are arrested on drug charges and held without bail. They are then taken to Massachusetts, and they will be remaining in jail there until they could be sentenced. Gary Thibodeau was actually held as a fugitive for a 2-year-old outstanding charge in Massachusetts for felony possession and distribution. He would have to remain in jail until he could be sentenced. At the same time, on May 25th, 1994, very early in the morning, around 7 a.m., Richard is about to leave for work from Teresa's house with Teresa's brother. He says, all of a sudden, I have 8 to 10 cop cars in my driveway. Teresa's asking her brother what happened to Richard, and her brother says, they just took Dick away. Teresa and her brother rush down to the courthouse just as they're bringing Richard Thibodeau in and arresting him for the kidnapping of Heidi Allen. Richard told the podcast the Heidi Allen case, Central New York's most enduring mystery. He told host Ryan Zaldonado that it was a nightmare. He said to the police, "You guys are crazy. I didn't kidnap nobody, you dumbasses." So why Richard and why Gary? Richard's van was searched and they found no DNA. So why were the cops so focused on the Thibodeau brothers? Richard was actually bailed out from one of his past employers who really trusted him. Her name was Jane Goodall. She bailed Richard out for about $15,000 bail, and now Richard is allowed to leave the jailhouse. He goes home, but his entire community is against him. Teresa tells the podcast also that Richard and their kids were being harassed now, anywhere they went. Police now want to speak to Teresa, Richard's girlfriend, and they also say to her, if you cooperate with us, they're going to help her move to any state she wants to go to and get away from all of this. Just tell us what he did, tell us what you know, and we will, get you out of here. And Teresa is like, no, I don't know anything. And she sticks to her story every single time. Richard woke up to go get me cigarettes, bought me cigarettes, came home. A big question has always been, okay, so Richard Thibodeau was the last customer at the D&W Convenience Store. You checked his van. There was no DNA. Okay, we can see how this could be a possible suspect. But why was Gary, his brother, a possible suspect? Like, where did Gary fit into the scenario of one brother goes to the store alone to get cigarettes and now the other brother is also involved? A few things pointed to Gary also being involved because there were some things said by Heidi's boyfriend, Brett Law, about Gary. Now, Gary was a local in a lot of the dive bars, and there was a story about how Brett and Heidi were a little bit weirded out by Gary at times, and Brett said that sometimes they would even call the bar ahead of time and ask if Gary was there, because if he was, they weren't going to go because Heidi was a little nervous around him. Gary would often flirt with Heidi, and it was known that he had said Heidi was a very good-looking girl. He made some, advances at her sometimes, and it just threw her off. She didn't like him. There was also Chris Bivens. Now, his whole story is, I don't know, something that I wouldn't completely trust or put a lot of faith in. But Chris Bivens was one of the witnesses that didn't call the police department until 5 days after Heidi had disappeared. And I do want to note, in the book, they also state that Chris Bivens' girlfriend at the time said that he wasn't the smartest guy. Anyway, on April 8th, he does call the sheriff's department. He says that he drove past the D&W between 8 and 8:30 on his way to church on Easter morning. He said he saw 2 vehicles sitting at the pumps. He saw 2 guys arguing with a girl in the lot. He was alone in his car, and he said that he couldn't describe what the guys looked like. He said one man had the woman in a bear hug from behind, and the woman was struggling and fighting, and she was upset. He said it just looked like, a woman upset with her boyfriend or something. So as long as it's her boyfriend, it's okay that he's attacking her in the parking lot, I guess. Okay, Chris. So this woman is fighting with her boyfriend, according to Chris, and another man. Why would there be another man there if you're fighting with your spouse or your boyfriend? If there's another man there, he better be fucking stopping the fight, number one. Anyway, he was actually quoted as saying something like, "I just thought this was your old typical girlfriend getting hysterical because her boyfriend's breaking up with her or something." 10 days later, they interview Chris Bivens again, and now he didn't remember the vehicle he saw. But 2 days later, they interview him again, and now Chris Bivens tells officers that, oh yes, it was a van that I saw. And this guy's story is going to change over and over. First, he didn't remember what vehicles he saw. Then he remembers that it was actually a van. Now he says, oh my God, yeah, I saw a blue van with a dark blue stripe and one man who was 5'11", another man who was 6'2". He was a little taller than the woman who was about 5'11". Both men were white, and I couldn't see their faces. At this point, Bivens is being interviewed again, and now they do not record this interview. They turn the tape recorder off. And now this is just me speculating, and this is my opinion, but did they turn that tape recorder off because Richard Thibodeau's van was white? Richard Thibodeau was 5'7", and Gary Thibodeau was 5'5". None of those things match up to anything that Chris Bivens just told police. So the tape recorder is turned off. Now 2 written statements are given. One is handwritten and then one is typed by the officer, but they don't know who actually wrote out the handwritten one. Basically, all I'm saying is that when Bivens is first talking to police, these men are 5'11", 6'2". Now these men are 5'7" and 5'5". And is that to make them actually closer to the same height as Richard and Gary since they were shorter men? I mean, because honestly, nothing's really pointing to them at this point. And they needed to make the men shorter. These police were trying really hard to find some proof because this case is about to go to trial and they don't have any actual proof. I mean, the van had no DNA. They also searched Gary's home, and in Gary's home, they did end up finding this furnace in the backyard. And a real weird part about this case is that inside of that furnace, they did find some bones. Bones and debris are found in Gary's furnace, but an anthropologist tested them and said that most of the bones were chicken bones. They were more consistent in appearance by non-human fragments. They also found a machete, saws, and shovels. They tested all of those things. All of them came back with no connection. So at this point, they have no weapon. They have no Heidi. But do you know what they do have? They have 2 jailhouse informants named Robert Baldessaro and James McDonald. The testimony of the jailhouse informants Robert Baldessaro and James McDonald is going to end up being the most important and crucial part to this trial. And they tell police that Gary would tell them in jail that he occasionally used drugs with Heidi Allen, and that one day Heidi got so upset with Gary, and they testified that Gary told them that he had bludgeoned Heidi to death with his shovel and that investigators would never find her body. I feel like usually jailhouse informants are getting something in return for their testimony, and you're, sitting in jail and you hate it there. Of course, you're going to say what the police want to hear. So I don't know. I don't know how much weight they hold with me personally. I'm sure sometimes it works out, but I'm sure most of the time it is used as a way to get something for themselves. So if I was on a jury, which they probably wouldn't ever let me now, but if I was, I wouldn't really hold much truth to what the jailhouse informant told me. Anyway, so on to the fact that the district attorney, Donald Dodd, he had a reputation at this point, and they talk about this a lot more in the book Scrapped, that his reputation was that he was real keen on getting jailhouse informants. He would promise these guys a lot of things, and that was kind of like his MO. Like everyone in this town, in this area, knew that Donald Dodd was the guy that was most likely going to bring a jailhouse informant onto the stand. For the trial, Gary was going to go first, and they were going to try Gary and Richard separately, and that was due to the fact that Gary had two jailhouse informants testify against him, but those two informants never spoke to Richard, so that couldn't be put into the trial. That couldn't be evidence or testimony against Richard Thibodeau. So Gary's trial takes place first, and on June 19th, 1994, a jury finds him guilty of kidnapping in the first degree. Gary is now facing 25 years to life. Richard is still not sentenced and has still not had his trial. But 48 hours later, after Gary was accused of being guilty, Richard is now arrested and brought in. After Gary was sentenced, Heidi's mother, Sue Allen, was quoted as saying, "I think there's other people. They've talked about that since the beginning. There's people afraid to say something or afraid of Gary. Well, now Gary's in jail and they're free to come forward. They're free to talk, and they will find out where Heidi is." So since Gary was found guilty, you would think, obviously, Richard's preparing himself to go to jail. He's ready to stand trial, and he's ready to be put away, just like his brother. But on September 29th, 1995, Richard's on trial, and his jury finds him not guilty. What the fuck? Two brothers who were accused this entire time have the same exact trial, except for the two jailhouse informants. One is found guilty and one isn't. So now Richard is set free. He goes back home and has to live with the fact that he called the police that day on April 3rd, 1994. And now his brother is in jail. And whatever side you stand on, if you think the Thibodeau brothers did do it, if you think they did not do it, why would one be sentenced and the other not? It's the most confusing part of this case for me. It was also confusing to Lisa Peebles, who filed a motion in Oswego County Court seeking to overturn the conviction of Gary Thibodeau based on new evidence implicating other potential suspects. Now, there are going to be a couple more people that are going to enter this story. This was in a Post Standard article published August 4th, 2014. The new evidence includes a statement from a woman who says that James Steen, aka Thumper, confessed to her that he and two other men, not Thibodeau, kidnapped and killed Heidi Allen and buried her dismembered body in the floorboards of a cabin in the woods off of Rice Road in the town of Mexico. In February of 2013, a woman named Tanya Priest would end up telling the police in Oswego County that a man named James Thumper Steen had confessed to her in 2006 that he and two others kidnapped and killed Heidi Allen. She says that Gary and Richard Thibodeau were not among those three men that were mentioned in this kidnapping and murder. The story goes something like Tanya got off of work, went over to her friend's house. Her friend was dating Thumper, James Steen, and they all sat around the TV. They were hanging out, having some beers, smoking, and a newscast came on about the disappearance of Heidi Allen, and that is when Thumper decides to admit to everyone proudly that he's the one that did it, and they had the wrong fucking guy in jail. Now, this is what Tanya Priest told police. This is not what I'm saying. Tanya told them that this is what Thumper said to her, and it took her a while to confess this to the police. She did not tell anyone for years, and she says that the only reason that she did end up telling someone about this was because, this happened in 2006 that she was told this by Thumper, but in 2010, James Thumper Steen actually murdered his estranged wife, Vicky Steen, and her boyfriend, Charles Carr. And James Thumper Steen was sentenced to prison for the rest of his life after this without the possibility of parole. So at that point, that's when Tanya thought it would be safe to come forward and say something. Obviously, the police asked her why she didn't come forward sooner, and she was like, I'm scared of this guy. Almost everyone is scared of this guy. And now he's in prison, so I thought I'd come forward. When James Steen was confessing to Tanya that night, they were all drinking, that he committed this crime and the wrong man was in jail. He actually said that his two friends helped him. They were named Roger Breckenridge and Michael Borer. And both of those men completely deny having anything to do with this. They were not involved at all. They deny any involvement. But Catherine Schmidt came forward and said to police that when she lived in Milwaukee, Michael Borer was actually convicted in 1981 of punching her in the face from behind at 2 a.m. and trying to force her into his car. Now, this was 13 years before Heidi Allen was kidnapped. A woman named Danielle Babcock also came forward and told police that she worked for Michael in the 1990s at his business. It was a computer repair shop business. She said that he used to tell her and all of the other females that worked there that if they didn't listen to him, he would do us like he did Heidi. Now, this is hearsay. This is coming from Danielle Babcock. I am not saying that this is true about Michael, but that is what one of his employees said. This information is from an article that was published on January 12th, 2015, the Syracuse.com, the Post-Standard. It is titled, Who's Who in the Heidi Allen Case, the Victim, the Suspects, Witnesses, and Lawyers. So in this article, they just give you a rundown of all of the people that were involved in this case. Another person named Carl Robinson had come forward to say that he was friends with Jennifer Westcott, who was Roger Breckenridge's girlfriend. And at one point, Jennifer had said to her friend Carl, quote, they had the wrong guy in prison when the two were talking about this Heidi Allen disappearance case. But Jennifer explained to him that she didn't want to tell him exactly what she meant by that because she said, quote, I don't want to end up the next one dead in a box in the woods. Police tried to get Tanya Priest to talk to Jennifer Westcott over the phone and possibly get her to give some more information on what actually happened or what she actually knew so that they could get this on tape. Police recorded a phone call. Now, it's a little difficult to understand Jennifer at times, but this is Tanya Priest calling her friend Jennifer Westcott to discuss the 1994 kidnapping of Heidi Allen.
Michael Bohr and Roger had taken Mike's van to the store, and that they grabbed her from the store and they brought her to your house, and he had said that you did flip out when you guys got there, and I stuck up for you, and I don't blame you for flipping out. And basically that's what he had said had happened, and that's, it's not your fault, though, So I knew a long time ago. I just didn't want you to think that I thought less of you.
I really, in my own head, dropped that shit.
Right.
I don't know, probably about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But it took me a while to get it gone.
Well, how in the hell why did they even involve you or even do this? I mean,
I don't know.
You were young.
I know it was that for cocaine.
It was for cocaine. Yeah, sounds like the area. I don't know, kiddo. I love you, and I'm sorry that happened to you.
Yeah.
Did you even know that? Did you even know that this was Heidi that they brought there, and that this is what they were gonna do? You had no clue. They just showed up with her.
Yeah.
Oh, what a bad position for you. Probably scared the shit out of you.
Well, it's not even. They didn't even bring her in the house.
Yeah, that's.
They made her sit in the van.
Well, Thumper told me they took her out in the garage, and me and Vicky at this point, honestly, Jennifer didn't believe him, and he said that they took her out in the garage and that they beat her till she died.
I don't know about that.
That's what he had told me. But I mean, as long as that's all you know and everything, and I mean, the only thing you said you did was junk the van with Roger, then I wouldn't really worry about anything. And you really had no part of it, and it's kind of sad that even happened. Is that why you guys went to Florida? She knows too, so I'm letting you know. Thumper told all of them. So I'm just giving you a heads up. Everybody in the area knows. Megan, Ruben, he told me and Vicky. He even threatened to kill me and Vicky. He said that if anybody said anything, he would kill me and Vicky. And me and Vicky, you know how Thumper is. At that point, he was just a happy-go-lucky guy. I never would have thought that, Jen.
Right.
And, what'd they do? Just leave her in the van when they got to your house?
Yeah.
Who actually freaking killed her?
I have no idea. It didn't happen around me.
Oh, good. At least you weren't part of that. It's bullshit that this even happened. And when was that? When the day she came up missing?
Oh, I don't remember.
No, kiddo, I love you. I wish I could just give you a hug, and I'm sure that'd make you feel better.
Right.
Did you know everybody?
Yeah. It bothers me to talk about it. I won't lie to you, but...
Well, I know, hon, but that's why it bothers me, because it's been bothering me since Thumper told me. I was like, no way, Jennifer doesn't know. She would have talked to me and Vicky about it, because we were all very close.
No, I couldn't say anything about that. Never to anybody.
Why did
That's me.
Yeah, why was it? Why didn't you say anything? Because they scared you, hon?
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure. Well, who scared you? Roger? Probably Roger living with you?
Yeah. It was all crazy.
Yeah, well...
Being out with all them people.
What'd they do, threaten you if you said anything?
No. I just didn't. They never said anything. Nothing was ever said to me in regards to it. And crazy.
Did you ever think about turning Roger in for it, honey?
Huh?
Did you ever think about just turning Roger in for it? No. It scared you that bad, huh?
I would never open a can of worms like that.
Right. Why? You hate him. He's done so much to you. You know?
Yeah, and I've been through enough. I don't want to even deal with anything new.
No, I can't say as I blame you.
God almighty. I'm not doing the investigator's job. I don't get paid enough. They're not going to give me a big reward.
Right.
You know? They're just going to laugh in my face and fucking, the hell out of here. What do you mean? Someone's already been convicted and blah, blah, blah.
Did you see anything that happened during it, or just freaking, you just flipped out when you knew she was there? Oh, good for you.
I don't even think, honestly, I knew it was her.
Right.
I was 18. I can even barely remember. I've done a lot of drugs since then. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
18 years ago. Got me.
Right. How the heck did you find out it was Heidi in the end?
I didn't. I just put two and two together.
Regardless of where you stand on this case, like if you think that Gary and Richard did do it, or if you think that there was a whole world of drugs and informants and maybe this James Steen and his gang did it, it doesn't change the fact that a family was lost in this entire situation. Heidi's family still doesn't know where she is. We should be able to bring Heidi home to her family. I cannot imagine how they have dealt with this for over 30 years. This is a crazy, crazy case that has so many twists and turns, but you have to kind of take yourself out of all of these crazy details and come straight down to the bare facts that this is a family that lost their loved one. They do not have any answers. Yeah, a man was convicted, but the other man that they were told did it wasn't convicted. Then they're hearing all these stories in the media about all of these other people having tapped phone calls, and where's Heidi is all that we need to find out. Still to this day, it is 2024. Heidi went missing on April 3rd, 1994. We still need to bring Heidi home. As I said earlier, Gary Thibodeau's lawyer, Lisa Peebles, the federal public defender, she had asked a judge to overturn Gary's conviction, and this was based on new evidence. In an article published by Syracuse.com, this was on August 26th, 2016. A woman named Amanda Brawley gave a sworn affidavit statement saying that Roger Breckenridge and James Thumper Steen had told her numerous times that they did dispose of Heidi Allen's body by leaving it in a van that they kidnapped her in. And then they took that van to Volney scrapyard and had the van crushed. Amanda Brawley was quoted, "I heard them say her body was still in the van and she would never be found." Amanda also said that she recalled a conversation in which someone mentioned Heidi's name and Jennifer and Roger laughed. And then she says that Roger said to her, "We took that bee to the scrapyard in the van, had it crushed, and she was shipped to Canada. She's long gone." Gary Thibodeau sat behind bars for the kidnapping of Heidi Allen for 23 years. In 2018, at the age of 64, Gary Thibodeau died behind bars, maintaining his innocence until the end. On January 2nd of this year, 2024, at 77 years old, Richard Thibodeau also passed away, and his obituary says, "Surrounded by his loved ones." Richard Thibodeau also maintained his innocence until the very end. 30 years later, Heidi's family, Heidi's friends, Heidi's loved ones, and the entire town of New Haven still ask that same question that hung on that banner in the town village. Where is Heidi? Thank you so much for joining me again this week on Residue. I appreciate it so much that y'all keep coming back, and it would be so cool of you to share with your friends, share with your coworkers, because sometimes they're not really your friends, but just share. That's the greatest thing you can do if you wanted to help me out a little bit. As always, you can find me on Instagram at Residue Podcast or Facebook at Residue, a true crime podcast. Or you can email me at residuepodcast@gmail.com. Tell me about any stories you want to hear, any local stories from your hometown that I might not know about. And hopefully you know what I'm going to say. I want you all to stay safe and stay paranoid.